Effective immediately, all bonuses are frozen, announced Vanessa Cole, smiling like she'd just declared world peace instead of professional bankruptcy. It was the Q3 wrap-up at Nexora Dynamics' third-floor conference room, the one with the flickering LED strip and the ghost of someone's reheated salmon haunting the air vents since June. The walls were corporate taupe, but that morning they may as well have been painted with dread. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, high on perfume, proximity to power, and the smugness of someone who'd just slept their way into middle management. Her title still had fresh ink on it, Director of Strategy, a promotion she earned through late-night alignment sessions with our CEO, Darren Lang. I didn't flinch. My jaw stayed still, but my pulse took notes. The room was packed. HR, sales, ops, even the IT guy who usually avoided daylight was there, clutching his donut like a security blanket. Vanessa wanted an audience. She flipped to a PowerPoint slide titled Q3 Efficiency Objectives, pretending this was about numbers instead of control. No one was watching the screen. Their eyes darted between her and me like they were waiting for thunder. She didn't look at me once. That was the insult. She spoke through me like I was part of the wallpaper, one of those beige panels that absorbed every bad decision in corporate history. "I know this is difficult news," she said, lashes fluttering with artificial empathy, "but we need to be honest about where value is really being created. Some legacy systems," she paused, chin tilting my way, "just weren't built for scale." Legacy. She spat it like it was a disease. I'd built Nexora's client retention division from scratch, back when our coffee machines still leaked and we used folding tables for desks. A $12,000 quarterly budget, a team of interns with psychology degrees and panic disorders, and still we'd slashed churn from 22 to 6% in 6 quarters. But to her, I was just a relic from before her contour kit and corporate vocabulary arrived. Someone cleared their throat, probably Jeff from Accounts' Human Tension Meter. "We'll revisit in Q1, Vanessa added. "But let's align expectations now so no one's building castles in the sky. A Pinterest quote from someone who weaponized positivity like tear gas. I didn't interrupt. Didn't ask about the missing metrics or the promised department review she forgot to schedule. 2 weeks ago, she'd asked me to mentor her on team culture over coffee. I'd said yes. She'd smiled, and here she was, gutting my people like a magician sawing volunteers in half. I stared at the small hollow of her throat, right where her lies gathered. The silence stretched, tight enough to hum. She flinched, just a flicker, the micro-twitch of someone suddenly aware their prey. I folded my hands, calm as still water. Across the table, Janet from payroll whispered something to Luis from HR, and both looked at me, waiting, hoping I'd explode. But I didn't. Screaming is for amateurs. I let the cold settle deep in my gut, the kind that doesn't boil, doesn't burn, the kind that plans. Vanessa moved to her final slide, Q4 Outlook, as if she hadn't just torched morale in front of 30 witnesses. The applause that followed was the kind you hear at a funeral when no one knows if it's over. She floated out of the room in a blazer too tight for humility, heels slicing the silence. I stayed seated until the last laptop snapped shut. Then I walked back to my office, shut the door, drew the blinds, and opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. There it was. The red tabbed folder labeled Lender Compliance, Nexora/Meriton Bank. Not metaphorical. Real. Inside, lending covenants, risk protocols, and one particular page I'd read so many times I could quote it like scripture. Clause 7b-6, buried in a sea of legalese but sharper than a blade. Any modification, suspension, or cancellation of managerial or executive compensation must be approved by a quorum of the board and disclosed to the lender within 72 hours. Failure to do so shall constitute a material breach of credit agreement terms. In plain English, you don't freeze bonuses without permission from Meriton Bank, unless you want your credit lines frozen too. I leaned back, smiled small. Vanessa had no clue. She thought she'd pulled a power move. She'd just pulled the pin on a grenade. 3 months ago, I'd written a memo highlighting that exact clause. Subject line: risk exposure, compensation governance, and lender compliance. Sent it directly to Darren and Vanessa. Her reply? Thanks, we'll review. That was her legacy. My memo was about to become her obituary. I scrolled through my sent items just to be sure. There it was. June 12th, time-stamped 10:38 a.m. Crystal clear. Subject line still sharp enough to cut. Vanessa's thumbs-up emoji reply sat under my bullet point memo like graffiti under a warning sign. Darren, our CEO, hadn't responded at all. He rarely did. He was too busy giving keynotes about visionary leadership while outsourcing actual thinking to whoever flattered him best that week. I opened the attachment again. 2 pages, precise, referenced clauses, links, lender contact info. Every risk spelled out. No one could claim ignorance. Yet here we were. An unapproved compensation freeze in writing, recorded in a meeting, broadcast to half the company. The clock on my wall ticked toward 6, each sound louder than the last. I closed Outlook, exhaled slowly, and reached for the red folder again. My fingers brushed against the paper's edge like it was a loaded weapon. Because that's what it was now. A trigger with her name printed across the barrel. I flipped to the page, reread Clause 7B6 aloud, and wrote 3 words on a yellow sticky note. Trigger, breach, leverage. Beneath them, I underlined one more word twice. Weapon. When I finally powered down my monitor, the office was nearly empty. Only the faint hum of HVAC and the blue glow of standby computers kept me company. I pulled out my personal leather notebook, the one that had survived 4 reorganizations and 2 acquisitions. Inside, I'd chronicled every memo ignored, every compliance oversight, every shortcut Darren and Vanessa took while calling it strategic agility. My pen hit the page with a calm rhythm. No rage, just record-keeping, because documentation doesn't shout. It waits. At 7:12 p.m., I composed one final email. Subject line, per Schedule B, recent developments. The body was short and cold. Attached is the original compliance memo dated June 12th regarding executive compensation and lender notification procedures. Please advise per Clause 7B6. Attachment. The memo. Unchanged. Recipient, Clive Morton, Senior Compliance Auditor, Meriton Bank. We weren't friends, but we respected each other. We'd crossed paths during Nexora's last refinancing round. Clive was the kind of man who treated documentation like gospel. No politics, no charm, just procedure. I hit send. Watched the message slide out of my outbox like a silent torpedo. No fanfare, no read receipt. Perfect. My fingerprints were clean. I shut the laptop, packed my notebook, and stared out the window. The parking lot below glowed under sickly fluorescent lights, rows of leased SUVs and tired ambition. The executive floor was still lit. Vanessa's silhouette moved past Darren's office window, probably updating her LinkedIn headline to driving transformational change. Let her. She had 72 hours before Clause 7B6 detonated. The air outside was warm, humid, heavy with the kind of tension that makes streetlights flicker. I lit a cigarette, my once-a-month ritual, and took one long drag. It tasted like paper and inevitability. Somewhere behind me, Nexora's air conditioning hissed like a dying animal. By the time she opened her inbox the next morning, I'd be gone. PTO. Approved. Reason? Family obligations. Reality. Strategic withdrawal. I'd booked a small coastal Airbnb 3 hours south. A week of silence, salt air, and plausible deniability. Thursday morning, while I was sipping coffee on the porch overlooking the Atlantic, Vanessa was probably finding the first crack in her empire. HR would have left her a sticky note. Quick check-in. Bonus freeze authorization. Stop by when you can. Janine. She'd laugh it off, iced latte in hand, linen blazer pressed to perfection. But laughter doesn't last long when compliance walks in with a folder. By 10 a.m., the dominoes began to fall. Janine didn't come alone. She brought Ruth from payroll and Martin from legal liaison, the corporate equivalent of a funeral procession. Vanessa's smile faltered when they asked to see the board minutes approving her freeze decision. Her lips twitched into the default corporate lie. Oh, Darren approved it verbally. Janine just nodded, polite, lethal. Of course, we'll need that documented for anything touching Schedule B. That phrase, Schedule B, hit her like cold water. She blinked, nodded vaguely, promised to loop Darren in, and watch them leave. The door shut softly, but the sound stayed. The silence afterward wasn't peace. It was the universe drawing a chalk outline. She had no idea that her countdown had already started. By noon, the whispers had started. Slack threads lit up like brush fires. Someone in operations said they'd seen the Meriton Bank logo on the visitor sign-in sheet. Someone else in finance mentioned that compliance had pulled Q3 resolution files from the archive and started red-flagging documents with no timestamps. Rumor even had it that Clive Morton, yes, that Clive, was in the building. Vanessa's perfect posture wilted behind closed blinds as she typed Schedule B into the internal wiki. One result: memo. Risk exposure, executive compensation, and lender notification procedures. Author: Rachel Warren. Date: June 12th. She clicked. 2 crisp pages. Bullet points, references, and her own reply sitting right beneath it. Thumbs up emoji, thanks, we'll review. Her throat went dry. She slammed her laptop shut. Moments later, Janine from HR peeked in again. Hey, sorry to bug you. Legal's asking for confirmation on whether Darren's approval for the bonus freeze was formal or verbal. Do you happen to have... Vanessa cut her off. I'll get back to you, she said, voice tight but smiling. Janine nodded, all professional cheer. Of course, just making sure we're covered in case the lender follows up. She didn't say because the lender already followed up. She didn't need to. Vanessa's face twitched, foundation cracking under stress. She waited until Janine left, then tried calling Darren. Straight to voicemail. She called again. Same result. Then she tried the CFO. Out of office until Monday. No context, no backup. By mid-afternoon, her hallway had turned into an echo chamber of paranoia. Employees walked past her door whispering too softly to be harmless. She caught phrases like audit and non-compliance. Someone from IT mentioned that external access logs had been requested by Meriton. She tried to steady her breathing. Her hand shook when she reached for her phone. Everything okay? Luis from HR asked as he passed. Of course, she lied. Just aligning resources. The words tasted like static. At 9:28 a.m. the next morning, the elevator chimed on the executive floor. Not another intern with a presentation deck. Not a delivery driver with breakfast bagels. It was Clive Morton, senior compliance auditor from Meriton Bank. He didn't announce himself. He didn't have to. His charcoal gray suit looked pressed by divine authority, his binder so thick it could stop a bullet. He walked with quiet precision, nodding once at reception. Good morning, he said. I'm here to review documentation related to Schedule B compliance. His voice was calm, deliberate, and final. Reception froze. Sure. One moment, I'll call someone. But Clive was already opening his binder, sliding a letter across the counter. Here's my access authorization, signed by Meriton's legal counsel. I'll need a private room, internet access, and the following: Q3 board resolutions, Schedule B amendments, and all documentation pertaining to executive compensation freezes this fiscal year. The receptionist's hand trembled as she pressed the intercom. "Janine, he's here." 10 minutes later, Vanessa stormed out of her office in heels that struck the floor like panic made audible. "Mr. Morton," she said with her most performative smile. "We weren't expecting you today." "No," he replied, closing his letter folder, "which is why I'm here." The pause that followed could have cracked glass. She blinked too fast. "Of course, let's get you set up in our conference room. Janine can help coordinate the files." "I prefer to receive the documentation directly from the source," Clive interrupted. "No assistance. I'll wait." Vanessa's throat clicked when she swallowed. "Sure, let me just loop Darren real quick." Clive didn't even look up from his binder. "Your CEO is currently listed as in transit, per his assistant." Last Schedule B update we received from Nexora was April 4th. Nothing subsequent. Vanessa's words came out too fast, too brittle. "No oversight. I'm sure it's just not filed yet." Clive gave her a look that wasn't anger. It was assessment, like he was measuring the depth of a grave. Then he sat down, opened his laptop, and waited. By 10:12, Vanessa was pacing her office like a trapped animal. Legal wasn't answering. Darren was untraceable. And out there in the hallway, a man with a red pen was grading her downfall, one line at a time. By 10:30, Janine reappeared, cautious as a nurse entering an ICU. "He's asking for the signed approval on the bonus freeze," she said softly. "Do we have that?" Vanessa forced a smile so brittle it might shatter. "Tell him it's being retrieved from archives." "Is it?" Janine asked before realizing her mistake. "Just tell him," Vanessa hissed, waving her away. The door shut. Silence stretched. Vanessa slumped into her chair, fingers digging into her temples. Outside, Clive's quiet typing was a metronome of doom. By lunchtime, the entire floor could feel it. The hum of panic, the shift in gravity that happens when someone powerful realizes the walls are closing in. Ops had noticed that their Friday reports weren't uploading. Finance discovered their vendor payments had been flagged pending. Someone in IT swore the audit servers were pulling data straight from Meriton's remote nodes. Vanessa's phone buzzed nonstop. Slack messages, emails, text, all ignored. She was too busy calling Darren again. Voicemail. CFO. Out of reach. She typed in the team channel. "Need clarification on lender communication protocol. Urgent." No one replied. Out in the hallway, Clive was calm as an autopsy. Red pen in hand, he annotated each file with the precision of a surgeon. At one point, he looked up and asked, "Could I have the full board minutes from the Q3 wrap meeting signed?" Janine flinched. "If the compensation freeze wasn't approved in session," Clive added evenly, "I'll also need documentation confirming executive authorization with timestamps." Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her practiced grin stretched thin. "Of course, right away," she croaked. The hallway had become a pressure chamber. You could almost hear the ticking inside her head. Somewhere across town, I was sitting on a balcony, sunlight slanting through a glass of cold brew, reading the morning news on my tablet. My phone buzzed once. "Janine, he's here." Then again, Mark from client retention, "Clive in the building, everyone's freaking out." I set my phone down, took another sip. The ocean rolled in slow, steady waves, each one smoother than the last. By the time I returned to the Airbnb later that afternoon, Vanessa's empire was already crumbling. I didn't need confirmation. You can tell when a storm has landed by the silence that follows. At Nexora, that silence was spreading like frost. Clive's binder had become scripture, his red pen the gospel. By 3:00 p.m., legal had been summoned, HR too. The words Schedule B were echoing through the executive floor like a curse. At 9:01 a.m. the next day, the board assembled. Not in the fancy glass-walled conference room they used for investor presentations, but in the smaller one, the kind with gray walls and the faint smell of fear. No coffee service, no idle jokes. Just suits, silence, and the thrum of tension. Clive was already there, seated at the end of the table, binder closed, laptop ready. He hadn't spoken since arriving, but his presence was a countdown. The board chair cleared his throat. "Let's begin," he said, voice brittle. No one dared look directly at Vanessa. She sat stiff, hands clasped, a bead of sweat tracing her hairline. Clive opened his binder. The sound was final, surgical. He turned to a red tab marked Schedule B, Clause 7B6. He read, tone even. Any executive compensation freeze must be disclosed to the lender within 72 hours. Non-compliance triggers immediate credit review. Then he lifted his gaze. Was the lender notified? The silence that followed felt like it could fracture glass. Vanessa inhaled sharply. We had internal discussions. Darren was going to... Clive interrupted, polite but lethal. That wasn't my question. Her laugh came out high and nervous. We were planning to file retroactively. There was a delay. Darren had the memo. The board chair leaned forward. Which memo? Her face paled. Rachel's, the one she sent in June. She flagged this exact issue. The room stirred. You assumed? Legal's voice sliced through the air. You assumed a Schedule B clause would just handle itself? Vanessa stammered. It was more of a temporary safeguard, not a full freeze. The CFO muttered. Jesus. Clive's pen clicked once, then stopped. So, to confirm, no board vote, no lender notice, and no documentation within 72 hours. He closed his binder with a soft, terrifying thud. Understood. The air in the boardroom curdled. No one moved. The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, humming with realization. The board chair, pale and deliberate, steepled his hands. We may need to call a recess, he muttered, but his voice was the sound of a man already buried in consequences. Clive simply nodded, expression unreadable. I'll be here, he said, and stood. The quiet thud of his shoes on the carpet echoed like punctuation. The glass door clicked shut behind him, and the room exhaled for the first time in 10 minutes. Vanessa sat frozen, eyes glassy, pulse hammering against her throat. The CFO, normally smug, looked sick. Legal counsel flipped through her notes, pen trembling slightly. No one looked at Vanessa. They didn't need to. The guilt was radiating off her like heat from a dying engine. This is salvageable, she whispered, almost to herself. If Darren, the board chair interrupted flatly, is currently in Milan. His assistant says he's unreachable until Monday. The words landed like a hammer. Vanessa blinked, mouth slightly open. He didn't tell me that. Of course he didn't, Legal said sharply. He left you holding the bag. The CFO's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, frowned, then answered. Yeah? His face drained of color as he listened. Put it on speaker. He set the phone on the table. This is Sarah Benning, Meriton Bank Compliance Oversight, came the calm, measured voice from the other end. This is to confirm that as of 9:46 a.m., all active disbursements under Nexora's credit line have been placed on hold pending review of Schedule B compliance. The room collectively stopped breathing. Sarah continued, clinical and final. No further access to operational funds will be granted until the review is complete. This includes payroll, vendor payments, and executive reimbursements. The CFO's hand trembled. You're saying everything? Yes, sir. Line A and all subsidiaries. There was a pause. Is there anything else you'd like noted? Nobody spoke. The CFO swallowed, his voice small. No. Thank you. The call ended. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was impact. Legal closed her notebook slowly. That's it, she said. We're frozen. Vanessa's voice cracked. This is a misunderstanding. We can explain. Explain? Legal shot back. To the bank? To the auditors? To the press? Once this hits? You acted unilaterally, Vanessa. It wasn't malicious. Vanessa shouted, her voice pitching upward. Darren told me. He said he'd handle the paperwork. The board chair cut her off. He didn't, and now we're in violation of our credit covenants. The CFO dropped his head into his hands. Payroll's due Monday. We're done. Vanessa looked around the table for an ally. No one met her eyes. Her perfectly curated persona, the bright smile, the influencer charm, the motivational jargon, was collapsing in real time. Please, she said, softer now. You all know me. I was trying to protect cash flow. By breaking a covenant? Legal hissed. You jeopardized the company's lifeline. The board chair stood, his voice stripped of sympathy. Meeting adjourned. We'll reconvene at 6. He didn't look at her again. As the directors filed out, Vanessa sat there, alone amid empty chairs and cold coffee. She stared at the door, half expecting Darren to walk in and fix it. He didn't. Across town, the waves broke in slow rhythm against the pier. Rachel Warren sat beneath a striped umbrella, a tall iced coffee sweating beside her. Her phone buzzed. Janine, HR. Did you see this mess? Rachel smiled faintly, typed 2 words. Not yet. Sent. Then she leaned back, eyes on the horizon, letting the salt air cool her skin. Because the thing about silence is, people mistake it for surrender. But silence, when aimed properly, detonates louder than any scream. And Nexora had just heard the first blast. By 6:00 p.m., the emergency board meeting was in full swing. Though meeting wasn't the right word. It was a corporate funeral. The long mahogany table looked smaller than usual, surrounded by directors with loosened collars and 1,000-yard stares. Someone had pulled in a whiteboard from an unused training room, scrawling timelines and arrows that all led to one name, Vanessa Cole. She sat near the end of the table, eyes bloodshot, knuckles white around her pen. Her navy suit, perfectly pressed that morning, now hung on her like borrowed armor. When the board chair finally spoke, his voice was stripped of warmth. Let's move quickly, he said. No greetings, no smiles. Just exhaustion wrapped in authority. Legal counsel began, flipping through a thick binder. Per our internal review, Meriton Bank's suspension of credit lines has immediate operational impact. Payroll, vendor contracts, and executive reimbursements are on hold until compliance clearance is issued. We are preparing disclosure statements for investors and employees. She paused, then added quietly. The trigger originated with a memo, June 12th, authored by Rachel Warren. Vanessa's jaw tensed. I know about the memo, she stammered. It was informational. I acknowledged it. Legal didn't even look up. You replied with a thumbs-up emoji. No follow-up, no escalation, no lender notification. The CFO rubbed his temples. 6 memos, actually. Legal continued. All flagged the same compliance gap. All ignored. The word ignored echoed like a gunshot. For a full minute, no one said anything. The board chair finally leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. So, let's review, he said. We have an unauthorized compensation freeze, no board vote, no lender disclosure, a triggered covenant breach, and a frozen line of credit. all traceable to decisions made by you and Darren. Darren knew, Vanessa snapped, desperation cracking through the veneer. He told me it was fine, that he'd handle the filing himself. Then he lied to you, Legal said flatly. And you believed him. Vanessa's breathing quickened. This was an internal misunderstanding. No, the CFO interrupted. It's negligence. The board chair closed his folder. Step outside, Vanessa. We'll call you back when we're ready. She froze, blinking as if she hadn't heard him right. You're asking me to leave? It's procedure, Legal added coolly. Nothing personal. Vanessa rose slowly, gathering her notebook like a shield. Her heels clicked across the floor in defiant rhythm, but the sound died as soon as the door shut behind her. Inside, Legal placed another document on the table. This is Rachel Warren's memo, she said. It clearly warns of the exact violation that occurred. Rachel was the only one who documented this correctly. The board chair skimmed the top page, then exhaled. She saved us from a lawsuit, or bought us time, the CFO muttered. Legal nodded. Either way, she was right. They didn't say it out loud, but the tone shifted. Rachel's name carried weight now, the quiet kind that changes rooms without effort. Outside, Vanessa sat in a hallway chair, staring at the frosted glass door. Her phone screen glowed with unanswered messages to Darren. Where are you? They're blaming me. Please call me. Nothing. The notifications piled up like evidence. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Rachel reclined on a beach chair, the sky melting into gold. Her phone buzzed with messages from her old team. Mark, client retention. They just sent Vanessa out of the room. Tamara. Legal's quoting your memo. Cynthia. Girl, are you seriously in a bikini right now? Rachel smirked, sent a photo, bare feet in sand, cocktail in hand, sunlight on her skin. No caption. She didn't need one. The message was clear. She wasn't coming back to clean up the mess. She'd already cleaned it before it began. By Monday morning, Vanessa was gone. No announcement, no farewell post. Her badge deactivated. Her desk cleared before the first coffee brewed. Her office sat dark, door ajar. The framed quote on her desk. Move fast and own the room. Lying face down in the trash. At 9:01 a.m., Rachel returned to Nexora. Her badge still worked. That wasn't an accident. The receptionist straightened up as if royalty had arrived. Welcome back, Ms. Warren. Rachel nodded once, quiet and steady. Her new title plate was already installed. Board Liaison, Strategic Risk. She closed her office door, sunlight slicing through the blinds. Opened her bottom drawer. The same red folder waited there. Lender Compliance. Nexora/Meriton Bank. She placed a fresh sticky note on it, 3 words written in precise blue ink. Use again if necessary. Then she locked the drawer and smiled faintly. Silence had done its job. The following week, Nexora hummed like a machine stripped of illusion. The hallways were quieter, the small talk clipped, the smiles rehearsed. Everyone walked softer, like the floors might remember. Word had spread. Bonuses gone, bank accounts frozen, and Vanessa escorted out before dawn like she'd never existed. Her office light remained off, her name scraped from the door plate, and HR avoided the topic like it was radioactive. By Tuesday, new memos circulated under Rachel's letterhead, reinstating compliance alignment, clause reinforcement protocols, Schedule B integration. Clean, clinical, no drama, just structure. That was her language. When Rachel stepped out of her office that morning, people straightened up automatically, not because she was loud or commanding, but because she wasn't. There's a gravity that comes from surviving chaos with grace, and everyone felt it. She paused by the glass partition, scanning her old department. The interns she'd trained were still there, wide-eyed but loyal. Janet from payroll smiled nervously, clutching a coffee like a peace offering. Rachel gave a simple nod. "Keep everything documented," she said. Janet nodded fast, grateful. Down the hall, the board chair waited outside the small executive conference room. "Rachel," he said, offering a tired but genuine smile. "You have a moment?" Inside, he didn't waste time. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled up, corporate armor shed in exhaustion. "I wanted to thank you," he began, "not just for the memo, for how you handled all this." Rachel sat across from him, calm, steady. "I was doing my job." He nodded slowly. "You could have made it ugly, gone to the press, blown it up. Instead, you gave us time to fix it quietly." She said nothing. Silence had always been her best argument. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You're being moved to report directly to the board. You'll have authority to audit executive actions tied to compliance, effective immediately." He slid a small folder across the table. New title, new salary, new trust. Rachel looked at the folder but didn't reach for it. "And Darren?" she asked. The chair hesitated. "Resigned. Friday night. Effective immediately. He's overseas." "Good," Rachel said softly. No smile, no victory speech. Just a simple acknowledgement that the math had balanced. When she returned to her office, the late afternoon light had softened into that quiet gold that makes everything look momentarily redeemed. She closed the door, sat at her desk, and exhaled. The blinds cut stripes across the floor, bars of shadow and sun. Her red folder waited in the bottom drawer, the same one that had ended an empire without a raised voice. She opened it again, smoothing the memo with careful fingers. Every line was still sharp. Every warning still true. On top of it, she placed a new sticky note, fresh ink, same blue pen. If they forget, remind them. Then she slid the folder back, closed the drawer, and turned the key. Her phone buzzed. The team group chat was alive again. "Tamara, CFO says the audit finally cleared. Banks lifting the freeze. Mark, HR confirmed. Payroll back by next week." Cynthia, "You did it, boss. Drinks Friday?" Rachel, "You all did it. Document everything." She set the phone aside, letting the screen fade. Outside, the sun dipped below the skyline, washing the windows in a dull amber glow. The building was still, save for the low hum of servers restarting, systems rebooting after the freeze. For the first time in weeks, Rachel allowed herself to lean back and breathe. No speeches, no vindication, no revenge montage. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that rebuilds. Because at Nixora, silence wasn't absence anymore. It was proof of precision. Proof that one well-written clause, one ignored memo, one calm woman could halt an entire machine and then rebuild it from the ashes. Downstairs, the cleaning crew vacuumed away the last traces of chaos. Upstairs, Rachel turned off her monitor, packed her leather notebook, and walked out. The red folder stayed behind, locked in steel. Not forgotten. Waiting.